let's look at how to create multi-table queries in Access. So multi-tables are just that. They're tables, queries that have multiple tables. So more than one table in the query. In Access, you can create queries from tables. You can create them from other queries as well. You can copy a query and rename it, and then go in and edit the query as you like so that you have a brand new query. So there are different ways that you can work with queries in Access. So what I want to do is show you how to do a multi-table query in the wizard and how to create one in Design View. And we'll talk about looking at the results of a query to determine if it's accurate as far as the number of records that you receive from the record set in the query. So let's go ahead and close the relationships table. But again, this first query, the wizard, just to show you kind of how it's related in the relationships, I want to run a query, create a query, and show the suppliers for each product. Okay, so in this case, you're going to be pulling each product and the supplier for that particular product. Okay, so for every product supplier ID, you're going to go to the suppliers table, pull that ID, and then pull the name of the contact, for example, in order to pull that into the query. So it's all in that relationship between the tables as far as how it binds that information. So let's close that and let's go to create query wizard. This will be a simple query. We'll go to the drop down and let's find our products table first. We'll just pull over the information that we want. You don't have to use all of the fields. I would try to keep it fairly simple so that you don't have a lot of data in your query that's unnecessary, and that, for example, if you have to create a report from that query later, you won't have so many fields on the page that you can't fit them all on there. So let's pull in our product ID, the product name, the cost, and the list price. Let's pull in whether or not it's discontinued, the category, and the supplier ID. Okay, so let's pull in the supplier contact information and maybe the supplier name. So all you have to do is go back up to the drop-down list here, and we're going to click on suppliers table. And again, you just add the fields that you need. We already have the supplier ID here. So let's just pull in the company and the last and first name of the contact person there. So in this query, we've got all of these fields. If you decided you didn't want some of those, you can remove them using these two buttons. So this one will remove one particular field. This one will remove all of the fields from this window. Okay, but I'm good with those fields. So I'll click on next, and I want to show the detail, not a summary. I want to show the detail of each supplier for each product. So I'll go to next. That's going to ask me what I want to name the query. So I'll call it product suppliers. When you create the query, it's going to run the query and show the results to you in the datasheet view. So it has pulled the data from those two tables that I used. And now you see the product information as well as the supplier information. Okay. So that's a manageable amount of information there. So a couple of things. How do we know that, for example, here we've got 45 records in what we call our record set, or the result of the query. How do we know that 45 is a correct number? So the way that you determine that is you've used two tables in this query, the products table and the suppliers table. So what you need to do is look at those tables and know how many records are in each table. So for the suppliers table, we have 10 different suppliers. So we have 45 in our record set for the query, so that doesn't add up. So let's look at the products. So we have 45 products. Okay, so that makes sense. We have 45 products and each one has a supplier. So in our product suppliers query, it makes sense to have 45 records. So the key here is you should have no more records in the record set or the result of your query than you have in the largest table from where you pulled data. So we had the supplier table that had 10 records, products table that had 45 records. So there should be no more than 45 records in the record set of our query. Okay, so let's save that. And let's go back to the Home tab and look at the views. We have the SQL view. Remember, that structured query language, and that's sort of some code that Access creates behind the scenes when you create a query and you run it. It automatically creates this SQL code that says to select these fields from these two tables using a join, meaning it's joining those two tables together based on the primary key supplier ID in the suppliers table, which is linked to the supplier ID that's in the products table. Okay, so that's SQL. You don't need to know that in detail for what we're doing, but it makes sense that Access is pulling that in the background. So let's go back in and let's look at Design View. So in Design View, you have two parts in Design View for your queries. You've got your tables at the top, and this might not show that referential integrity is enforced like it would in your relationships window, but don't worry about that. You can always check it in the database tools relationships window, but it doesn't always show that referential integrity here. Okay, so for our tables at the top, you can see both of those. And at the bottom, you have the grid, which shows for each field the table that was pulled from. You can go in and sort your fields. You can show different fields. And we'll talk about the criteria in a different video. So for example, if I wanted to sort them by product name, ascending, I can do that. And I have to run the query again. Every time you run it, it runs that SQL code, it goes back into the tables and pulls the data from each of those tables. Okay, so now it's sorted by the product name. Okay, so that's our first one that we used for the wizard. Okay, so let's save that. And let's go in and create one using Design View. Okay, this time I want to create one called Customer Orders. So let's go to Create Design View. And when you open it in Design View, it should bring up this Add Tables button, and it's right here as well, but it's got the navigation pane here for the Add Tables. All you need to do is select the tables that you want to appear in your query. So it's pulling up the queries right here, so that looks weird. There are no tables, but it's because it's selected queries right here. So again, you can create it based off of other queries, but we want to create this from tables. So we want customer orders. So we're going to pull in from our customers table and our orders table. And let's pull in our order details table so that we know what the customer ordered from each individual order. So we can pull in the scrolling here so that we can see all of our fields. Okay, so now that you've got those, you need to go in and pull in the fields that you need and add those to the table below the grid. If you double click on the asterisk, that's going to add all of the fields from that table. It adds them as one field, so you can't go back later and add a criteria to one particular field if you do it that way. So I wouldn't necessarily choose that option unless you know that you're not going to sort or pull in a criteria for one particular field in that table. So let's go in for each customer. Let's pull in the customer ID, the company name, the last name, the first name, and let's pull in the order ID, the order date, let's pull in the payment type, and let's just go in and pull in the product ID, each product that they ordered, and the quantity, the unit price, and the discount. Okay, so that's a lot of fields, so let me close this window, and now we can see all of those. Okay, so we've got for each field the table from which that was pulled. So let's save that as customer orders, and let's run it. So now it's pulled in the data, so we can see for each customer the order information for each particular customer. So for example, for Edwards, he had an order, which is order number 32, and it had 2 items in that order, and you can see the information about each item in the order. Okay, now here we have 61 records in the record set. So how do we know if that's correct? We use the customers table, the orders table, and the order details table. So we have 30 customers who have placed 49 orders. And in the order details, there we go. We have 61 items that have been ordered in these 49 orders. Okay, so the order details shows the details for each order, meaning the products that were ordered within each order. Okay, so there you go. You got the 61 right there. So remember that your record set shouldn't have any more than what you have in your largest table, which was 61. So you can at least get a good gauge there for whether or not your record set is correct. Now, if you wanted to go in, you could go in to view your table, and you could delete a table from here if you wanted. If you wanted to go in and add another table, you can do that. You can just drag and drop, and you should see those relationships there. And then you can just double click to add the fields to the table, and you can run it. But I don't want to do that. I'm going to leave it as it is, so I'm just going to click on that, press delete on the keyboard, and now that one is gone. So that's a brief overview of multi-table queries, and we'll talk a little more in another video about the criteria and how to customize those a little bit more.